You've gone from effectively having credit card debt,
Yeah.
selling a car for £8,000,
Yeah.
bit of borrowing from friends and family, to building a 7-figure rent-to-rent business and a £2.5 million property portfolio. How many rent-to-rent properties do you currently now have?
So I've done over 70 deals.
What's your cash flow looking like at the moment for your rent-to-rent business?
Yeah.
Let's play a game called objection handling.
All right.
I'm going to be the landlord. I'm going to have certain objections and you're going to see how you, as the specialist in your field, are going to be able to overcome them. Welcome back to another episode of the PBK podcast. Each and every week we have an amazing guest where we discuss all things property. Today I'm joined by Simon Smith, property investor and rent-to-rent specialist, also looking at things like BRRR, so loads of great information. Simon, how you doing?
I'm good, bro. What's happening?
Good, man. I'm good. Appreciate you coming down. You've come from quite far today, right?
Yeah, I jumped on the train. Not too bad, like hour and a half. I'm based in Derby, Nottingham area.
Okay, nice. And were you always based around there?
So yeah, grew up in Derby, and then I always had a passion for music.
Okay.
So when it was time to go uni, whatever, I was like, I might as well come London. Come on, in the smoke and see what I can do. So when I was like 19, I moved down to London, and I was in London for about 10 years.
Okay.
And then moved back over the past 5 years.
Okay. So what were you doing before then? Before you got into property?
Music, man.
Music. In what capacity?
So singer-songwriter.
Okay, nice.
And I'm vocal producer. That's why I was catching jokes
Okay.
on the way up. So yeah, basically I sort of around the uni time I was DJing and that. I went Queen Mary not far from here, and then I got into MCing. So I was quite a big part of the dubstep movement. I used to be Benga's hype man. Okay. And touring with all them guys. And then a little bit after that, I ended up doing more sort of songwriting stuff, vocal production stuff as well.
Okay, interesting. So I guess my question for you then, the question for a lot of people is, how do you feel your previous career helped you in the property space?
Interesting. So I think I always had a passion for music and performing, which a lot of people say, Simon, why do you do so much content? I'm like, because I think that kind of fulfills that need. So I can still perform and do cool stuff like this. And then the property side was literally out of sort of my business acumen and just knowing that I needed a recurring stable income that I never got in the music industry.
Interesting. I think, yeah, definitely watching your content, I see that, you speak very well, you're very confidently, a lot of, your content is very produced, it's very sort of looks very highly produced and high end. So I think that definitely comes from that space. And I think, being able to utilize previous skill sets is really important in any business, that you want to pursue. But why property? Like a lot of businesses have reoccurring, repeating incomes. What was it for property that first sparked that piece of interest?
Yeah, no, you're right. Because technically, I got into songwriting because I thought, well, I'll do a record and I'll get the recurring royalties, right?
Get the points.
Come on. Yeah. So I was like, okay, yeah, it makes sense. Because when I was doing the MC and stuff, like if I didn't do the show, I didn't get paid.
Of course.
So it was like, okay, well, how about I go into more of the songwriting stuff and try and get royalties? But the problem I had was that I would go in the studio, I'd record however many songs, I've recorded hundreds of songs, then one might get picked up and you think, oh, okay, yeah, this one's going to be this, that, and the other. And then it just doesn't come to fruition. And a few times a year, you'd get your royalty checks and I'd be like, yeah, this one is going to be bad because I'll have wrote said song. I look at it, I'm like, there's a few grand, like, I can't feed my family and all that with that. Do you know what I mean? So it was like, okay, well, I had this moment and I was 10 years deep in the music game and I was fortunate enough to write with some big artists here and in LA. And I was so gassed up and sure that it was going to convert to the monetary.
Yeah, the monetary return.
Imagine that. Like I actually wrote songs for Britney Spears that made her album. And I thought, yeah, this is Britney money, man. I'm clear. Yeah. Looking at the check, I was like, nah, this is mad. So I was doing stuff in the UK with likes of like Tory Lanez and Dappy and that, like more like urban stuff. Same again, like no royalty checks. I was 30. I'd always done music. I was like, I'm going to have to get a normal job, man. I'm just going to have to do a 9 to 5.
What was it about? Like, why was it the agreements? Like, was it the agreements that you had, or why was it that you didn't get the level of financial remuneration you hoped for?
Good question. I think 2 different reasons. Reason number 1 is you're relying on the record being a single.
Okay.
And a big one. So if you do, there might be 15 records on an album, and if yours is just the album cut,
Okay.
albums aren't really selling like they were back in the day. And then I think the shift to digital and the online streaming meant that the songwriters didn't get looked after in the same way.
Yeah. And I guess it's like whether or not, because randomly even like an album cut could get picked up to be used for like an M&S advert, and then that it's getting that constant playback every Christmas, for example. The best example ever is like the Mariah Carey Christmas song. It's forever. Every year she knows Christmas coming, payday. But I guess if you don't have that side of things, it does become you work, get paid, rather than the consistent flow of reoccurring income. But then I guess to go back to the question, what was it about property as opposed to, because at this point in time, you're in the music space.
Correct,
so
yeah.
you could have decided to, be a butcher, a baker, a candlestick maker. What was it about property that you said, that's where I want to kind of try and hang my hat?
So I kind of came to this crossroad, and I considered getting a normal job. And at the time, I was exploring crypto, because this was like 2017. I was exploring crypto. I was looking at property on YouTube and podcasts and a couple of other bits. I even nearly did a music festival. So I was like, okay, I've got a music background. I've got to try to do the business, do a music festival a year before COVID, bro. That would have ended well. So yeah, I kind of was like, do you know what? I started off in crypto and I lost a lot of money. I went on one of them, them sites where they were supposed to giving you a return.
Yeah.
And then one day they just popped. I was like, do you know what? Bricks and mortar. Like, surely I can't go wrong with houses.
So that was your turning point, that you tried digital assets and you just unfortunately got burnt, and you decided that you wanted something that was a lot more tangible, that you really understood the asset class that bit more.
Yeah, I was like, I tried the crypto thing, and then I tried to get a normal job, and it's like, like, I don't know if you had it, but like when you make a change and there's a moment, like a rock bottom moment where you're like, I've got to change here, man. And I'll never forget it. So the week before I'd played Glastonbury in front of, 20,000 people, but the money wasn't right overall. So I decided to go for a job interview, and I only had my like funeral and wedding suit, them ones there. So I pulled up for this interview. There's a guy about 10 years younger than me. And I got through the first interview, but I felt like so just like demeaned, if you know what I mean. I just felt like this ain't for me, but I was just like, I got to do what I got to do. I went to the second interview now. I thought I was, good. They were like, this is a sales, you can make this amount of money. I was like, okay, cool. So I got to the second interview, and this lady gave me this backpack. She said, right, you're off with me today. Took me outside or whatever, got on a bus. I was like, this don't seem like sales, like executive. Got me on this bus, pulled up at this co-op, got me to pull out this table outside this co-op, bro, and they had me selling life insurance outside of a co-op in the freezing rain. And literally like a few weeks before, I was in LA, like I'll never forget it. So it was raining, and it was one of those like, them like small like Costa Coffee type vibes, where there's a co-op and stuff. I was like, I'm just gonna bop to the toilet quick. Went in the toilet, called my missus. I was like, yo, they got me selling life insurance outside.
Do you know what's crazy? I've just had the maddest flashback. I did something similar to that once.
Is it?
I've not thought about this for probably 16 years.
Mad.
And I've completely forgot that I did something very similar, like it was maybe like 15 years. And I did something like, I was like, I needed like a job or needed more money. I remember, I think I was like selling SIM cards, but at outside Superdrug. It was like in one of them like pop-up stands. That is crazy. I've literally
That's
I've
mad.
gone mad off topic, but I completely forgot I ever even. I think I literally did it for like a day, and they called me back to be like, right, you're on this location. And I was just like, yeah, unfortunately, I was just like, I'm sick. I can't come back, and never did. But I definitely think sometimes it is those turning points where you say, this maybe isn't for me. And that's not to say that, you know, any opportunity can't be great for some people at different times. Because, for example, my role in Phones for You, like, that was a sales role, was quite low paid, but in terms of the skill set that I learned in being able to sell, being able to work with different customers, being able to build relationships, upsell, cross-sell, has been incremental into my entire role. And I think there are amazing opportunities in 9-to-5s. And I just always like to push this out there, that, you know, 9-to-5s can be a great place to learn a skill set, to build money on other people's time, with other people's risk. But it's not always for everybody. You've got to do what works for you. So you realized at that point in time that wasn't going to work for you. And then how did you then first get into property? Because it's, although you have certain skills from your previous roles and positions and life experience, you don't necessarily understand the intricacies of property investment in the different strategies. So how did you actually learn?
So yeah, so it was mad. So I left, went back to ground zero. I was like, okay, right, that ain't, the crypto thing didn't work. You know, this whole sales thing or job thing wasn't going to work for me. Right, property, let's go. So I started doing loads of research, and I seen one of these free property events. Now, it was weird because about the same time, one of my longest friends, I've known him since I was like 2, and we grew up on the same sort of estate. There was like 6 houses. Well, I thought he lived there, but it turns out he was his granddad's, and his granddad brought it. So it turns out he had heritage in property. And years later, I bumped into him about the same time I was going through this change, and he said, "Oh yeah, Si, listen, you know, long time, you'll have to come and see one of my HIMOs." I was like, "What?" He's like, "Talking about HIMO." I'm like, yeah, all right, cool. See him again a couple of weeks later because I was back in Derby. He's like, yeah, you'll have to come and see one of these hate shows. I was like, all right, cool. Anyway, a few times he asked me. Eventually, I went, and turns out he was on about a HMO. So he'd just done this 6-bed HMO and was telling me he's got 6 students in. He's going to make 1,200 quid a month. I was like, oh, okay, cool. I was like, oh, I'm going to this property event on the weekend. He was like, yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, no, that'd be sick. Just whatever you do, don't run to the back of the room. Didn't know what he even meant by that. So I went to this property event, ran to the back of the room with my credit card, which at the time I had to get a credit card to pay for the wedding because I was getting married, which was one of the drivers as well. I was like, oh, I've got to step it up here. So I went on this course. It was for deal sourcing. But I sat there for the weekend and all these light bulbs just started going off when I learned about all these different strategies.
Okay. Nice. So then what was the first strategy that you decided to embark on yourself?
So at the time I didn't have money. So I was like, I'm going to start with this deal sourcing thing. So I was going to deal source BRRs basically. So you have the weekend. So I think I went on the free one. They upsold me. I went to the next one. They then tried to upsell me to a 10 grand mastermind. I was like, yo, that's my limit. Enough's enough. I'm just going to have to go on my own now. Yeah. So I went back to Derby, started viewing all these properties, kind of managed to almost get a couple. But have you done much deal sourcing or?
So I've never done deal sourcing. I mean, I'm very familiar with the process, but why do you ask?
No, just because the issue I had with deal sourcing was it was the same as the music game. I work once. Yeah. I get paid once. And the other thing is, it was out of my control, just like the music industry. I could write the best song, but if it don't drop with the right artist, so it was the same thing. I'd like get a property under offer and the investor would be in, but then the investor would fall out. Yeah.
I think there's, and it's important to talk about like the downsides of some, strategies that can be really great for a number of reasons. Like I think one of the great things about deal sourcing is you learn a skill set for something that you want to implement yourself at the point in time that you have capital. You build relationships with local agents, you build relationships with investors, potentially you build relationships with people that could become partners down the line. Yeah. But the downside is that, as you mentioned, a lot of it's out of your control. You're also having to work to get paid all the time. So if you don't go and source another deal, there's no recurring income in it. But I think it still overall, can be a very good strategy, just understanding fit for purpose.
It's a sick strategy, and I've gone on to do it more down the line. But just at that time, it was just felt not quite the right vehicle for me at that point. But like you said, I was viewing all these properties, I was building all these relationships, and I was finding all these sick deals, but I just didn't have the money to buy them. And, I got one or two away, but I was like, okay, do you know what? The wedding's coming close. I need to get on with something. So I decided to sell the car I had, because you know what it's like when I got a decent publishing figure some years early. What did I do with the money? Went and blown it by buying a M Sport cash. So I brought this car for cash, 28 grand. Nice, M Sport. Sold it for 8 grand. We buy any car. Yeah. Killed me. And I just basically got that 8 grand. I got some money from my parents, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to buy one of these properties and just get on with it and see how I get on. Yeah.
So that was your first BRRR deal. How did that actually go? That was in Derby?
Yeah, it was in Derby. It was like 85 grand. So
let's talk about that as a specific deal.
Yeah.
So 85k purchase price. What does that look like in terms of money you have to have in your pocket to do the deal?
Yeah, 100%. So basically, I think I managed to get a 20% down. So what's that? 17 grand down. Yeah. It was technically my first time buy.
First time buyers.
So I got a little bit of a break on that. So I probably needed less than 18 to buy it, 18, 20 to buy it. And then I spent 15 on it, which I didn't have enough money for the refurb when I brought it. I was just like, I'm just going to figure this out. I only really I had the 8 from the car. I had a few grand savings, and then I actually borrowed some money off my old dears to buy it. And then I was just trying to make
it work for the refurb budget.
Did the refurb, and then 6 months later, I got it revalued at 125. I think I kept it on 80% loan to value at that point. So I did pull out, what's the math on that?
So I think 80%, you're at sort of a loan of, would you say 125?
Yeah.
A loan of, give or take 100k, 100 to 100.
100.
Just over 100.
And I owed 70.
So yeah, so you owed 70. So you pull back out in terms of your initial capital.
Yeah.
If you owed 70 and you put in 15 on the refurb and another, say, 20, you're sort of in for 105. So give or take, you pull out almost all of your money, maybe give or take sort of 3,000 to 5,000 at a max.
Yeah, so I pulled out a decent amount of money. I was like, give it to an agent, started making £600 a month. I was like, yo, this is it. Like, yeah, this is what I've been waiting for. But, I had the wedding.
Yeah.
And certain other commitments, because I borrowed a lot to do that in the first place. Do you know what I mean? And keep in mind as well, I technically had 25 grand equity as well. Yeah. For anyone listening at home, like I pulled out my money, but I had 25 grand as well there, but I wanted to keep it for the cash flow. So then I essentially ran out of money. I didn't have enough money to do another one. That house is worth 165 now. I just refinanced it again. I was like, why didn't I buy more of them? I just didn't have the money. So then it was like, okay, well, I want to do this. I know it works, but I need another strategy. And that's when I remembered from the original weekend thing, maybe rent to rent.
Okay. Okay. So I think that's important for a lot of people, particularly starting in property. You have things that will bring you cash flow, or be that buy to let, be that rent to rent. And then you have things that are going to give you chunks of capital, whether that's flipping property, whether that's deal sourcing. And there's often conversations, a really interesting debate I had myself around like what's a better strategy. But I think the honest answer is in most cases you have to run 2 horses, because you have to be able to fund your life, and then you also have to be able to build your working capital pot to be able to go and buy longer term assets to hold that are then indirectly going to fund your life. So it's like a circle of a full infrastructure. So you went back into the bubble and said, right, I'm going to go and look at rent to rent. So what type of rent to rent strategy? Was it rent to HMO? Was it rent to serviced accommodation? What did you go into and why?
So because I technically just turned this 2 down into a 3-bed mini HMO, that's what I knew. So I was like, okay, then, well, the easiest thing is probably a 3-bedroom property with 2 reception rooms. I'll convert the second reception room into a 4th bedroom, and then I'll rent it out to 4 professionals or students. So that was what I was looking for. So I was pretty much just looking for 3-bed properties. And that sort of happened over it probably took about 8 to 10 weeks before I managed to get my first solid opportunity. It does take time, especially because at the time I had no help. I was just trying to remember and do that whole thing where I'm just piecing it all together. And I think it took me 11 or 12 solid viewings. Like one I went to and I overshared. I was like, listen, mate, you know what you want to do is you know, did you know how much you getting? You're only getting £700. Did you know you get £2,000 for this? Yeah, what you want to do is just partition this wall, put 5 doors on this, and you could, and the next thing you know, he don't hit me back. And I see he's advertising the property as a mini mo, just done what I said. Or another one, maybe the property was a bit too tired. So yeah, eventually I saw this property and I couldn't understand it. It seemed really, really cheap. It was 650 quid, but I could see it was 4 lettable rooms. It was also on the sales market. And I think, I can't remember what, you know, the add-ons you can get to Rightmove to see how long it's been available for.
Yeah.
I had one of them. I seen it was on there for 12 months. So I called the agent, but they didn't do company lets. They didn't want to let me see it. So I did a land reg search and I found the owner's details and I went on Facebook and started to try and find said name in my area because it was a bit of a rare name. I started finding all these, there's about 3 different ones it could be. And I just inboxed them all. And then I've not really told this story in this much detail, but then I went on to the person's page and I could see their mutual friends, so I could see who their relatives were. Okay, disclaimer, data protection.
No problem.
But
keep transparent.
That's what you do. So anyway, I managed to get in touch with the owner's son, and I said, "Oh, you know, if you could just get the owner to give me a call back urgently regarding the property." And within an hour, he did. So I met him down the property, viewed it, explained what I was doing, and I got the feeling he knew it was my first time, but I think it was almost like he just saw me and him, and we just had an understanding, and he just basically decided to go with me.
Okay, nice. And then, so do you still have that property now?
I'm just about to buy it.
Okay.
So
nice.
So I'd done that December 2018. It cost $6,500 to do it. I painted and decorated the whole place. I put new carpets in. I only had $3,000 at the time, so I put my $3,000 in. I borrowed $3,000 from a mate. I got £500 on a credit card to basically make it work. But then what I did was I charged first and last month's rent rather than the deposit. So it's 500 quid a room. So I got $4,000 back instantly. And I got really lucky. The 4th tenant paid up front because she didn't have a guarantor. Yeah. So I think I got $3,000 plus another 5. I got $8,000, paid them off. And then I was like, okay, so the first deal I just showed you, I needed 30. This one, I only needed 6, and technically only 3 of it was my money. Yeah. I was like, okay, this is it.
So that was like your proof of concept moment that it works. And I guess with that, how important do you think, you know, for you when talking to other people now that are trying to get their first deal is going that above and beyond and kind of actually really putting in the work to try and get the first deal across the line?
Yeah, so I mean, so for me, that first part, the reason it took me so long to get that first deal was because I was meeting landlords and they were saying, what's your website? I was like, I ain't got a website. There was like, what's your office number or whatever? I'm like, I ain't got an office. So basically I put together like 12 steps, and the more of those steps I did, the easier it got. Because it was like, there's my website, there's my virtual business, here's my phone number, and it's a landline because I've linked it up with a virtual office. So now it's like if you've done those 12 things, you can fast track how long it
Fast track the ability to close.
took me, and you can come across with the right professional image from day one. Because I think a lot of people think rent to rent's low barrier to entry and you can just kind of wing it. And you can, but not if you want to do it to the next level.
Interesting. So now, obviously, sort of fast forward, how many rent to rent properties you currently now have?
So I've done over 70 deals in Derby and Nottingham. I'm currently on about 40.
Okay.
Half of them, interestingly, so I did a BRR, I did a rent to HMO, and then I couldn't find a second HMO for ages. So I ended up doing this 2-bed, and I did SA on that.
No.
So that's basically summarized my whole strategy, which is rent to rent 2.0, as I call it. So about half of mine are SA and half of mine are HMO.
What do you think for people that are looking for rent to HMO properties versus rent to SA? What's things people should be looking at to make sure they're going to work for the end user?
So I look at rent to rent in 3 main stages. Stage 1 is about controlling the asset. So in sort of this sector, it's all about essentially preparing, doing your market research. It's about sourcing the deals and then closing the deals. The majority of that's the same, whether it's HMO or SA. The only difference I find is that SA, there's more flexibility in terms of you could have a 5-bed property, a 2-bed property, a 1-bed flat, a cottage, you know, a caravan, whatever, right? Whereas on the HMO side, it's typically, I find if you're in the north of England, you can probably make 4 lettable rooms work. Down here, it's usually 6 or more to make it really work. But I try and say, look, there's 3 steps to rent to rent. The first step's controlling, and that's pretty much the same whichever you do. The second is cash flow in that property, whether it be SA or HMO. And then the third is systemizing it to free up your time.
Yeah.
Because when you start managing a lot of properties, it's a lot of work if you don't put the systems in place.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're definitely going to get and touch on some systems that you can use later on. I guess in terms of pitching to landlords, obviously you said initially you started quite non-conventionally and just trying to make it work for you. And over time you've built out a strategy. Give me like some key pointers of like, how do you close landlords when it comes to when it comes to, you know, rent to rent?
Sure. So I guess there's kind of 2 parts. The way I've got my rent to 100K sort of mythology. I've got it all mapped out because basically what happened was I documented my first year of doing rent to rent on another online community, let's say. I did 20 deals in year 1. I was just documenting it all. And people were asking me, how do I do it? So at some point I decided to just deconstruct it. So in terms of sourcing deals, there's 2 parts. There's the sort of sourcing part, and then there's the closing part. So in order to source deals, obviously you can go direct to the vendor, which is technically easier. It's harder to get those leads, but it's easier once you've got them because there's no middleman, right? And my whole thing with direct to vendor is a lot of people go in there and because they've just been on a free course or whatever, and they say, I'll guarantee your rent, I'll take on all the management and maintenance, 3 to 5 years, all these buzzwords, when I advise people actually just to stop and just listen and just ask.
It's like what your mum would have told you growing up, that you got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And I think that is a massive part of negotiation. If you negotiate based on what you're saying and what you want, a lot of the time you're going to make it way harder for yourself. Like, if somebody's got a property, work out what they want and if you can give them that, and then do that. Versus you may over pitch and over deliver, and you may they may not care about a maintenance package. They may not care about things that you're offering for no reason, and now your value proposition has gone down because you could maybe offer slightly more money, but slightly less level of services, or slightly less money and slightly more services. But I think it's really, really important when you are negotiating to focus on listening first and speaking second.
1000%. We call it going past the sell. Sometimes you got the deal, bro. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like you ain't got to keep selling. So in terms of the direct to vendor, where the main sort of selling happens is on the viewing, where I basically recommend building rapport, being likable, because if they don't like you, it ain't gonna work. But to the same degree, you gotta like them.
Yeah.
I mean, just because they got the asset don't mean they're in control. Like, you're offering a great service too. So the first thing is the rapport. Second thing is the actual property. Having a viewing and looking at it and getting your head around the history of the property and why it might work or why it might not work as SA or HMO. Because every time I'm viewing, I'm largely open to both.
Yeah.
Because I've got the systems. The third thing then is, okay, well, I used to call this pain points. But not every landlord is in pain. Yeah. So it's like motivators I prefer.
Okay, yeah.
So like the landlord might be good because he's got 10 people queuing up to rent the property and yada, 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 yada. But his motivation might be money, like you said.
Interesting. So should we play a game? Let's play a game called objection handling.
All right.
I'm going to be the landlord.
Okay.
I'm going to have certain objections or motivations, and you're going to see how you, as the specialist in your field, are going to be able to overcome them.
Like that.
So my first one is that I like the idea. However, I'm just concerned that more people means more damage to my property, more wear and tear, and it's not going to be looked after as well as if I would have just had a single family in it.
What do you mean by more people?
I know you mentioned obviously about potentially using it for, serviced accommodation, which means a number of people coming in and out, or using it as a HMO, which means I'm going to have a higher level of occupancy with having, 4 people as opposed to maybe just a smaller family.
What concerns you with that?
It's just the potential damage. I think just, the number of people and the volume of people. Also, maybe the more in and out, the higher turnover means that there's more likely to maybe be more damage, more usage to my property as a whole.
I'm with you. I understand where you're coming from. So just for clarity, you're saying that if there's more damage to the property, or if there's more people in the property, there may be more damage. And then when you get the property back, it might have had overly wear and tear. Is that fair?
Yeah, so like just in terms of things that I may have to replace at a faster rate, just conscious of that and the impact that's gonna have on my bottom line.
100%. A lot of the landlords we work with also have similar concerns. What we do is keep in mind we're gonna not only do regular inspections, regular cleaning as well, but we also guarantee to give you the property in the same or better condition that you get it. So you're not gonna worry about it.
Okay. But then what about, I guess, I just think about things like, maybe, I don't know if it's like, stuff that doesn't maybe fully come under wear and tear, but it's going to be used a lot more, like my bathroom suites and things like that. Is there, what do you think about stuff like that?
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I guess it doesn't matter what tenant you have, there's going to be a level of wear and tear. But, a lot of the landlords we've worked with for over 5 years, we take great care of the properties. Keep in mind as well that there may be more turnover than if you had a family that stayed for 5 years. But over the past 5 years, have you had much turnover with your families?
Reasonable amount, it's vacant now. So it's just an example that they do leave at points.
Because we always push for longer stays. And a lot of the landlords actually find that we look after their properties better because we've got eyes on them all the time. We've got so many clean so we can stay on top of it. Whereas sometimes when you have a family that's in there for 3 years, there can be a lot of wear and tear too.
Fair. I think it's good.
What are you saying? Do you want to move forward?
I've still got a few more queries. So, objection number 2 that I often say is look, I like the idea, but obviously we've got a family A that have, a predetermined income. Their one's a accountant and the other one is a dentist. Whereas I feel you know, like, you know, the type of people that are going to be renting the rooms, maybe they're not on as substantial incomes. So I don't feel as secure in terms of my, you know, my rent effectively being guaranteed because of tenant profile.
Sure. Why do you think there'll be a sort of a lower profile?
I guess just maybe because their rental or their expenditure and budget is a lot lower than, I guess, when it's being split between 4 people.
I mean, so we're working with the NHS. We're working alongside Rolls-Royce, Altsam. Actually, this area is the highest per capita income outside of London. So a lot of our clients are very high end, and a lot of the time it's actually their companies that are paying. So you're in good hands.
That's good. And I think that I mention that, and I like to use examples like this just to show that, you know, there are always going to be objections. In all business, there's going to be loads of reasons people give you a no, but it's your job as an entrepreneur to find ways to make them say yes. And that doesn't mean creating a story, but that means explaining very clearly the benefits of your proposal as a businessman or woman. So mentioning your tenant profile and why they're amazing, mentioning, you know, why, despite the fact they're being wear and tear, that it's actually covered, so not the landlord's responsibility. And I think one thing I find too commonplace is a lot of businesses don't focus on what they do that's really good. They just focus on the business as a whole, like as a generic, this is the overall proposal. I think that's good. I think I might rent a property or two to you off the back of that. Come on. Might do. So I'm gonna ask you some other questions around, you know, obviously you were massively successful in the rent-to-rent space. I think, you know, 20 units in, did you say 12 months? Is an amazing trajectory. But obviously a lot of people do suffer with that. And I think it's always important to talk about the difficult stories as well as the good stories. Working alongside people in the rent-to-rent space, why do you find people often suffer to take on a higher volume of properties and take their business to the next level?
I think a lot of people feel like the deal is the win. But for me, that's kind of why if you think about it, most people want to do property because they want 3 things really. They want money, they want time, and I believe money plus time equals freedom. And what I realize is if you get a rent-to-rent deal, but you don't cash flow it, there ain't no money. So you've not ticked that box. And then if you start cash flowing it, but you've not got no systems, you ain't gonna have no time. So what I find people is they feel like the deal is the end goal, but actually it's not. So people tend to neglect the systems, neglect the cash flow, and what that means is they don't get the end result they're looking for. And then a lot of people quit rent to rent and say, oh, it's too much hard work, just because you've not put the systems in place.
It's a great segue into systems. I'm a man that loves systems. I love track. I feel like, you know, they say like, give the job to the laziest man and they'll find out how to do it the most efficient. I think I can be that guy. I love to delegate and find ways where I have to do as little as possible. Like this podcast is a testament to that. I turn up, I shoot, the podcast is ready within a couple of hours, goes over to my editor who puts it online, and we're done. It's systemization. It allows me to focus on things like finding great guests, like finding my next development opportunity. So what systems do you implement in the rent-to-rent space?
Sweet. So I split the systems into sort of 3 sections. Section 1 is all about software. So that is, if you're doing SA, that is things such as a channel manager, which basically is a central operating system that manages your Airbnb, your booking.com and all that stuff. And pricing things such as Price Labs or Rate Genie, which automate your pricing. Like the amount of SA providers I speak to, and every day they're on their pricing, like going da 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 da. I'm like, yo, you cannot. You might get away with that with 5 deals, but not when you got 50. So we put all these things in place. You know, damage deposit, payments is all automated. Communications is all automated, so that you don't have to worry about that side of it. an example for HMO is, for example, Inventory Hive or Arthur Online or Coho, just to manage things so it's all optimized.
So let's take some deep dives into actual, because there's so much, particularly obviously because prop tech's a massive buzz now as well. People trying to make tech that can make property investment or focused around property and make it, you know, more technologically focused. I've used a lot of different systems and softwares over the time. So first, let's talk about channel managers. What's your go-to at the moment?
My go-to is to keep.
Yeah. And is that based on user interface? Is that based on price, or a combination?
A combination, to be fair, although more so the user interface, the plugins, the app for my phone. I did a post on the way down here saying that I don't roll with a laptop no more. It's like phone or iPad at the most. So yeah, I tested loads out, and that just felt like the best overall solution for me.
Okay. And then what about, I guess from a HMO perspective, like tenant management? What do you use there, or what have you enjoyed using?
I like Arthur Online. I have used Coho as well. Both pretty solid. But I remember at the beginning, I just had spreadsheets and like all that,
you know,
right?
So I've got like a balance. And I've tried to use a few different ones. Like recently, use Landlords, who are pretty good. Like Landlord have got a free software, and it's online based. And then they also have like a premium version, but it works pretty well. Have used Arthur Online. Arthur, I like the idea of Arthur, and I just think it's still a little bit clunky in terms of it's got so many good features, but sometimes they're harder to find. It's almost like you have to go and dig and be like, oh, this is amazing, but I wouldn't have known this here if I didn't actually sit down with somebody who could explain it. I was an early adopter with something called Good Lords. I don't know if you've ever come across Good Lord, but they do tenancy preparation. So they do a lot of that. They do the referencing. They do, you know, like you can kind of use it as like a sort of a manager as well. And this is one of the things I mentioned about being early adopters to stuff. Like when you get on board with early tech, they had an offering that was $349 for a lifetime use. They're now $349 per month to use. So I've got lifetime. I think I started using that in like 2015.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I still use them, and they've been really good. But yeah, definitely, I think if you are going to scale a business, you have to look at obviously the tech implementation, and then you also have to look at delegation and actually taking people on board. At what point in time did you feel like you needed to hire somebody or get somebody to help with the overall process?
So, so just to quickly pivot around. So software, which we've touched on, processors, and then once you've got your processors team, because if I've done every single part of my business, every single part, so that allows me to process it, which means I outsource it. Have you ever tried outsourcing something where you ain't processed it?
Listen, I have this conversation when people talk to me about using like virtual assistants and things like that. If you don't know how to do something, how do you expect somebody who's not even based in the UK, who has never done it, is going to be able to? You have to be able to show them first for them to be able to deliver second. I think a lot of people just hope. I just hope I'm going to employ someone, they're going to be a great property manager.
And finding good property managers is hard.
Listen. Because I don't think, a lot of people don't know that I actually had a rent. I think some people had a rent to rent business.
Did you?
We built out a decent size, about 50 units, all HMO, so 250 obviously working units. And I tried, you know, very established property managers on probably 40K, tried like multiple VAs, tried like a new starter in like an apprenticeship scheme, tried, you know, somebody's maybe part-time, maybe after having a child, tried so many different people. And it was just trial and error, like trying the right people that can embrace your kind of business culture that you want to build. And I think one of the reasons I failed was that I just was hoping someone was going to come in and just miraculously do exactly what I wanted, without saying I'm actually going to have to sit down with this person for a good 6 weeks to build out that business culture and ethos to make sure we're all effectively singing off the same hymn sheet.
100%. I didn't know that. Sick. So yeah, it's really, well, it's hard finding a property manager, and it's even harder to find a serviced accommodation manager, because who the hell wants to take calls at 10 o'clock at night and talk about this, that, and the other, this, that, and the other with a guest. Don't get me wrong. Like, there's times where you as the founder might be willing to do it because you're getting the cash flow, but someone that's just on a basic, they ain't going to do it. So it was kind of like, okay, finding the processes. I've experimented with like front of office staff. So people that do all the viewings or the tenant facing stuff or the property setup, all that. And then the back office staff who do more the admin. Like literally I got a lady and all she does for me is bookkeeping and utilities. That's all she does. But I realized that I think to answer your question, when I got to about 20 units, it was like definitely time to hire. But what I say now is when you get to 10, like on average, if we say your average, it depending on where you are, just for quick maths, if you average £1,000 cash flow per deal and you do 10 grand off 10 units, let's get a member of staff, pay them 2-3 grand a month, and then scale to 20 is what I would do if I was starting again.
I think it makes a lot. So I think there's this interesting sort of, if you look at the life cycle of a rent-to-rent business, depending on what you want would depend on how large you need to grow that business.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of people just look at rent-to-rent, say, I'm just going to be in it and volume and do as much as possible. But if you're looking at it, for example, as a means to maybe leave another line of work, if you want to go and maybe get into development, but you need the stability, sometimes you maybe that 10 units that's kind of maybe self-manageable is the perfect point. Because I definitely, and this is just my personal experience, but I saw this weird graph where, you take on rent to rents and it goes really, really well up until the point when it's not sustainable. And then it basically, you then have all of these additional costs of systems, cost of staffing, cost of advertising. You've exhausted maybe your initial like local demographic of people that you knew and had warm leads with. So now you've got to pay for marketing, pay for a way better website, pay for design, pay for SEO stuff, and all of these different things that potentially you start paying for. So you go like this and then it drops back down for it to get back up, and you're in that annoying point in the middle where you're making a lot less money and doing a lot more work. So I think for people that are looking to get into the rent-to-rent space, I would definitely say before diving headfirst in, have a plan of where you want to get to and then evaluate once you get there and say, look, do I want to go further? Do I want to take this to the business that's gone from making 10K a month to making 30, 40, 50K? Or do I want to focus on maybe something else and just work out what's going to work for you and then build your ecosystem around that?
I could not agree more. That's exactly what I've seen. When you get to that sort of, I think the sweet spot for me was probably around that 20 to 25, where I still didn't need a huge team. The money was really good and it was still manageable. When I got up to like 50, it did get to the point where I had a full letting agent. Like I'm talking morning meetings, like levels of management, like a proper business, like a proper system. So basically what I've realized now in terms of what I believe the end game is we all want freedom and you want legacy wealth. You touched on it earlier. So my strategy was always, let me create first things, create massive cash flow. The second thing is you have to secure it. Like when COVID dropped, it was crazy because when COVID happened, I was guaranteeing like 40 grand a month rent. And Boris was like, lock off. Airbnb just went offline. You literally couldn't put your property on Airbnb. And then in terms of the HMO stuff, I think I was listening to one of your other episodes where he was talking about this. Obviously, you can't move people in because they're self-isolating. But to the same degree, people don't want to move out. It was like a massive, like, weird time. I actually just observed the masses and did the opposite. I was like, do you know what? If I can ride this out and if I can start scaling, and that's what I did. I did like another 20 deals through COVID, which was tough. But then by the end, I had so much stock.
And I think that is definitely the case in almost every business. There's a popular saying that the most millionaires are made in recession. And when there's a tough economic climate, And when there's threats to the market, like basic, your year 9 SWOT analysis is threats equal opportunities, and weaknesses can be converted into strengths. And as an entrepreneur, that's what's good. And it's great to see that you're able to achieve that. And in hindsight, if I would have retained like my rent to rent portfolio, looking at stock that, we were renting out for £1,500 a month, that now 4 years down the line, even on the open market, rents out at 2,500-3,000, in terms of what it would have been cash flowing. But it's all hindsight, and it's great to learn and have these learning curves and these experiences that when you have these tough times, you learn a lot more from your mistakes than you do from your wins. So that's great to see. So what's sort of next for you? What are you hoping to do?
For me now, it's literally taking money off the table, and that's been my whole thing. So for the first 3 years, it was all about scale, and then pretty much I've been buying 2 to 3 a year since then, and because I'm like nearly 6 years in, a lot of my original 5-year agreements have come to the end. So it's like, okay, cool, well, I either go again, the landlord wants to sell and I'll buy, the landlord wants to sell and I won't buy, but I might source on, or maybe we'll go again. But yeah, my aim, as I famously said, like in the music industry at one point, I had it all, relatively, but didn't act smart, didn't know when to take the wins. And I think I felt like it would go on forever, and nothing lasts forever. So this time I'm not messing around. So we're about to buy property 9 and 10 off the Cashflow, which means I've pretty much equaled the cash flow goal that I originally had for rent to rent. And then it's up to you then what you do next.
Because now, so what's your cash flow looking like at the moment for your rent to rent business?
So we do 1 million, 1.2, 1.3 a year. As you touched on, actually, I was gassed when I saw that £1 million. And when I moved back to Derby and I went to my accountant, I was in a bit of a mess. And he's actually passed now. He passed last year. It was crazy. But every time he would see me, he was like, "How the hell have you done this, bro?"
Because you've gone from effectively, like you said, having credit card debt. Selling a car for £8,000, bit of borrowing, like beg, borrow, steal from friends and family, to building a 7-figure rent to rent business and a £2.5 million property portfolio.
Yeah, we're I think after these, so we're buying 9 and 10, and I'm I actually decided to buy a sort of a coach house 3 years ago. Mad planning, mad restrictive covenant, like mad stuff, but the GDV on that's 1.2. So we should be sitting on about 4 million at the end of the year.
Sort of pipeline projected GDVs based on development potential. Amazing. So
4 million owned, rent to rent business 1.2. As you said, profit margins have gone down as you've scaled, around 20%.
But it's the same thing. Like you would rather have, a smaller percentage of a big business than a big percentage of a small business. I think that all comes down and speaks to where do you want and what do you want to get out of any industry, because property is the same as any business. It's just a business that you're choosing to grow to fit, the lifestyle that you want to live and the things that you want to be able to leave, and the assets that you want to own and control.
Yeah, so, that's great. And then Simon Smith Online, the mentoring business has just exploded as well. And the way that came about was when I was documenting it, so many people would hit me up and ask for help. And they wanted help from somebody that was doing it. So I just started helping people. And as you mentioned earlier about my content, I pretty much got all my original music guys and stuff involved. So like the guy that does my content, he like shoots Becky Hill's videos and this, that, and the other, because he's a music guy and he just does my property stuff and so forth. And that effectively
can be almost like a USP as well, because there's a load of great people in property and there's a load of great people in the production and music space. But if you can marry the two and bring that skill set together, you can then differentiate yourself from other people in the industry as well.
Exactly. And that was my whole thing with the mentorship thing. It was like, what's everyone else doing? I'm just going to do the opposite. So if everybody's doing free events and then running to the back of the room, I'll charge for my events, and well, there'll be no running to the back of the room. If everybody's doing like weekend courses and then there's no ongoing support, the minimum I'll do is 90 days. You know, if like everything that I felt was wrong with it in the first place was the catalyst that made me want to do it and make it affordable and actually back it with results. So I insist on speaking to every single person I work with and making sure that I feel like they can achieve the goals. And if they can't, I won't work with them, because I'm not just trying to take people's money. I'm trying to help hit goals. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And that's good. We're definitely going to put the details in the description for people that want to connect with you and find out more. Before we let you go, decided now, this is just like a new thing I've decided today.
Come on.
But I'm going to start asking a couple people some quick fire questions. And normally, like, so this is going to be in your space. So when it comes to rent and deals, would you prefer quality deals or quantity of deals?
Quality.
Quality of deals all day. Okay, amazing. Then when it comes to sourcing rent deals, through agents or direct to landlord?
Direct to landlord, man.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. I think you've answered this, but I'm going to ask you again. Rent to SA or rent to HMO?
Oof. Rent 2.0, man.
I need one or the other, please, sir. One or the other, or you're gonna have to give me some of that dubstep performance.
Yeah, literally. You know what? I feel like it depends on your goal. Like for me,
I'm asking you.
Yeah, I'll get to it.
I need the answer first and a disclaimer second.
Okay. I think I would have to go for rent to HMO.
Rent to HMO.
But it's tight. And have you noticed our hotels? Yeah, you know, you go to a hotel, they don't just do rooms. They got the gym, they got the spa, they got the restaurant, they got the bar, they got the conference room. There's a reason for that. And that's why I feel like SA on its own has a limit. And that's why if you're doing Rent 2.0, which is SA and HMO and another income stream, and then ideally some that you own, that is the ultimate.
So let me think if I have any more questions for you in my quick fire round, because I should really write these down, or people, when I know I've got guests on, should help me with these quick fire questions.
Yeah.
Exactly. I need my just little pocket projector out to see what I'm saying. Okay, I think my last question in relation to the rent to rent space is, do you know what? This is actually a quick fire question, but I guess in rent to rent, you know, you do sometimes see people bash rent to rent online because of it not having the ownership. And a lot of people, when they speak on property, the reason they speak about it is because of building generational wealth. How good of a investment vehicle do you think rent to rent is?
So the analogy I give is, there's so many different sort of layers to this, but in simple terms, the traditional form of investment is buy to let. And usually people save the deposits, right? And then they buy a property. Now, if you're sat there at home now with 50 grand in the bank, down here, you ain't got a chance, but let's just whatever. Let's say you've got enough for one house, okay? Generally speaking, what's going to happen is you're going to buy that one house and your money's going to be tied up. Technically, you could do a BRRR, but we know that takes 12 months end to end, right? So what happens is you can put 50 grand in. In fact, the analogy I actually do is if it's a 600 grand house in London and you can buy it or you can rent it, it might cost you a couple $100,000 to buy it. And it might cost you 10 grand to rent it. And there's so much more leverage in terms of building cash flow that my strategy is build cash flow to the point where then you can pay for your living and then you can start buying, but you secure the cash flow first.
Okay.
You can't do that if you're just buying one house, waiting 12 months, but you'll be working for the next however many years, right?
Interesting. Always like to ask, I always think the whole purpose of these podcasts are to have interesting conversations, to incite debate, so you have an opportunity to open your mind to different thought processes, different ideas when it comes to what holistically really is opportunities to make money. So really appreciate having you on today. This has been another episode of the PBK podcast. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, make sure you like the video. We're going to be back next week for another amazing episode. So lock in and we'll be back real soon.